Well, good afternoon. Today is the National Day to commemorate the victims of communism, and that includes more than 100 million people who have been killed in some 40 nations governed by a communist party in the last 100 years or since the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. And today, 1 out of 5 people alive on Earth still live in a single-party communist dictatorship. And we have just had a meeting with the president, and it was a very meaningful, impactful, moving meeting. The president was very interested in the stories of those behind me, representing life, their experiences in the countries of Poland and Venezuela and Cuba and Vietnam and North Korea. And he asked them questions. I think it was an important moment, and I appreciate the president taking time to learn some of these stories. They are just representative of many millions. And I want to thank President Trump. A lot of people for a long time have called for the victims of communism having their rightful place in our nation's memory. And President Trump was the president who made that happen. In 2017, on the 100th year anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution, he declared America's National Day for the Victims of Communism. He repeated the same thing last year and again today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aldona Vosh, who is Vice Chairman of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation.
Excuse me for 1 second. As the print cooler, I have to ask, why was the whole press pool sent away before this event?
We'll finish this and then you can cut it off.
Aldona.
I'm Aldona Vosh. I wanted to express our thank you to President Trump for honoring the memory of 100 million people who have died and were persecuted under the communist regimes, under the failed ideology of communism. My entire family, as well as millions of other people of Poland, suffered tremendously under communism. I wanted to tell you that I am extremely grateful and blessed to be an American and live in the United States, in a country that offers us an opportunity to live in dignity, in freedom, and to fulfill our full potential. Thank you.
Hello all, my name is Daniel DiMartino. I'm from Venezuela. I came here 3.5 years ago. From Venezuela to the United States. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm very grateful to be at the White House and to the president, because the stories of us who, my family was a middle-class family when the dictatorship of Hugo Chavez started in 1999, and I was born that same year. And we were making, thousands of dollars a month, 3,000, 4,000, like many Americans do here. And by the time I left, we were making $2 a day because of hyperinflation, price controls, nationalizations of the means of production, including our own business or gas station that they took away. So it is very important that Americans know that socialism doesn't work. And it doesn't work because it goes against human nature. It goes against the incentive for us to work for our own benefit, for our family's benefit. And because of that, is that those policies destroyed my country, and I want to keep America a country that is free and a country where everybody continues to be able to prosper. So I'm very thankful for that.
Soy Cirley Ávila León, cubana. Estoy aquí en Estados Unidos prácticamente en contra de mi voluntad. Tuve que salir para salvar mi vida y para reclamar justicia por todos los defensores de derechos humanos.
She's Cirley Ávila León. She's from Cuba, and she had to leave her country, and she came here to, speak for people who fight for human rights in Cuba, and for everybody who she knows.
Agradezco al gobierno de Trump que con sus medidas contra el régimen cubano ha disminuido la represión en un 45% en esta etapa.
She thanks President Trump's government for his measures against the Cuban regime because thanks to that, repression in Cuba has gone down by 45%.
Me siento una víctima de Obama porque con sus negocios y sus concesiones a los Castro fui víctima de un ataque por defender los derechos humanos.
She feels like a victim of the Obama's administration because thanks to his policies, gracias a sus políticas,
con sus concesiones al régimen Castro.
because of his concessions to the Castro government, she was attacked by a machete that almost killed her.
Después de Obama soltar los 5 espías culpables de provocar la muerte hasta de ciudadanos americanos,
After Obama released 5 spies that led to the death of even American citizens,
el régimen Castro cogió fuerza, abrió nuevos negocios, inclusive hasta con Francia,
Castro's government was empowered and even started doing business with countries like France.
y todo ese capital que le entró lo utilizó para la represión contra los activistas de derechos humanos.
And he used that money to repress human rights activists.
Cualquiera que vaya a Cuba, lo invito a que camine para que vea la pobreza, la miseria que vive el pueblo cubano.
She invites everybody who has been to Cuba, who goes to Cuba, to see the poverty and the human misery.
Sin embargo, los Castro utilizan millones de recursos para su propaganda comunista por el hemisferio y el parte del mundo.
And now the Castros use their resources to spread communist propaganda around the hemisphere and the world.
Yo fui una víctima comunista también.
She was also a communist victim.
Nací 9 meses después del triunfo de la revolución,
She was born 9 months after Fidel Castro came to power with the revolution.
creyendo en la política de Castro de que el capitalismo era malo.
And she believed that capitalism was wrong and that she believed in Castro.
Fui adoctrinada al odio desde que nací.
She was brainwashed and she was born.
Fui elegida por mis vecinos en una zona rural,
She was elected by her neighbors in a rural area
delegada del Poder Popular para que los representara en el gobierno.
as a representative to the government.
Según la Constitución cubana, mi derecho era canalizar sus inquietudes y tratar de buscar respuestas.
According to Cuba's constitution, it was her duty to represent her community and advocate for them.
Por reclamar una escuela primaria en esa zona
And for asking for a primary school in her area
y reclamar que le pagaran a los campesinos sus mercancías que eran obligados a vender al Estado.
and that the government paid the farmers for their production that they sold to the state.
Me consideraron, tuve que ir 12 veces al Consejo de Estado
She had to go 12 times to the Council of State, as it's called,
porque las oficinas municipales y provinciales nunca me hicieron caso.
because the government regional offices, municipal and provincial, didn't listen to her.
Ahí fui considerada contrarrevolucionaria,
She was considered anti-revolutionary for that.
trabajando toda la vida para el gobierno,
After she worked all her life for the regime,
teniendo un hijo que llevaba 20 años militar en las Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias.
having a 20-year-old son who was part of the military in Cuba.
Por eso conozco lo que es el castrismo y estoy aquí para evitar de que las personas digan que en Cuba hay democracia.
She knows what Castro's regime is, and she's here to stop people from saying that Cuba is a democracy, because it's not.
Sé que ningún gobierno extranjero debe de involucrarse directamente en solucionar nuestros problemas, pero agradezco a Donald Trump las medidas en vista a de eliminarle el flujo de capital a los Castro.
She understands that it's no other country's duty to get involved to solve Cuba's problems, but she thanks President Trump's administration for all he's done to stop the flow of money to the Cuban dictatorship.
Muchas gracias a ustedes por escucharme
Thank you all for listening.
y estoy en la disposición de contestar cualquier
And she can
pregunta.
answer any question.
Good afternoon. My name is Quỳnh Nguyễn. I'm come from Vietnam, and people also know me with my band name is Mother Mushroom. I was sentenced up to 10 years because expressing my peaceful opinion on the internet. And I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Mr. President Donald Trump with the United States for my family freedom. Especially, I would like to say my sincere thanks to the First Lady Melania Trump, who through the Ministry of Affairs has given me the International Woman of Courage in 2017 award. This made me feel raised up in the motivate they captivate in prison, and I think that the U.S. policy with the third decision with Mr. President Trump has changed a lot, and it stopped the expansion on the Southeast Asia Sea and the expansion from the Chinese communists. And I would like to say thank you to Mr. President for the effort to protect the universal human rights and especially raise the voice for the victims of the communists in the country like China, Cuba, Venezuela, Vietnam, and North Korea. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Grace Jo, and I am a victim of North Korean regime. I witnessed my 3 members of my family, they passed away by starvation, and my father, he got killed by the regime. So from 8 of family members, only 3 people survived back in 1998, and 3 of us, my mother and my older sister, 3 of us were wandering in China to look for freedom. But for 10 years, our freedom were not able to find in China because Chinese government never allowed us or accepted us as a citizen. And we forcefully sent back to North Korea 4 times, and then we witnessed that how those children suffering in the orphanage shelter, prisons, and how those females got abused, and how those males, they got beaten by the officers. So when I witnessed that, I thought and I believe that my country is not giving us any freedom, and there's no human rights at all. After I came to America, I learned how we can live as a human being, and I feel like, wow, this freedom is amazing, and that's how we can live as a human being. We all are equal, and we are God's creation. We deserve to live as a human being. And I would like to ask the United States to keep force the North Korean sanctions, keep press the North Korean regime, because that's the only way North Korea can change their regime or policy and give those small little freedom for those people. Especially, I would like to thank to former President George W. Bush. He signed the North Korean Human Rights Act in 2014, and after that, my family were able to come to the United States as refugees. And I will greatly appreciate to the United States to allow us and adopted us as a new citizen in the United States and granted us a freedom. So we. My family are very appreciated to the American people and American government. And for the future, I hope the President Trump also raise the human rights issues when he meets the North Korean leaders and keep force them, and please help those innocent people from North Korea. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something that, it's good to have a president that really recognizes the struggle that other people around the world are going through in socialist countries. I don't think the United States ever had that, and that no other president really cares as much as President Trump does and Vice President Pence about what's going on in Venezuela, especially, or in Cuba, or North Korea, or in Vietnam, China, all these countries that are really oppressed. So, my biggest, really sincere thanks to President Trump for this opportunity to be here and tell him our stories. Thank you. Yeah.
What did President Trump tell you about his relations with President Xi and Kim Jong-un? Did that come up?
That didn't come up specifically. And I also would just say that, we're about to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Iron Curtain. And these stories remind us that although communism collapsed in Europe in 1989, it lived on elsewhere. And sadly, we see, because of the Cuban Communist Party and their influence in Latin America, specifically in Venezuela, and also Venezuela, Maduro, supported by loans from China, of course, controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. It's not at all clear that communism is decreasing in its influence in the world. And what you have in Hong Kong also is an entire population of young people who grew up in a free city. Their parents and grandparents grew up in a free city, and they've gone to the streets, 2 million out of 7 million, to make it clear to the world. Population of 7 million and 2 million of them in the streets, months-long protests going on. They do not want to be ruled by the Chinese Communist Party. And so I, again, thank President Trump for taking leadership, but also not just pointing out in a sort of forensic way that humans and families and whole societies are harmed by these dictatorships, but that there is an ideological component to it. And, Xi Jinping has made it clear that he is confident in what he calls socialism with Chinese characteristics. And the Castro regime is surviving into a new generation of Castros in Cuba, very confident in their authoritarian, kleptocratic form of government. And then, of course, Maduro is hanging on to power in Venezuela, justifying it in the language of a Marxist revolution. And that's why it's particularly upsetting to see in this country, because of a failure of education or a lack of knowledge about what's going on in the world today, that 70% of millennials say that they are extremely likely or somewhat likely to vote for a socialist. 1 out of 3 millennials say now that they have a positive opinion of communism. This is not what the 21st century is supposed to look like. And I thank President Trump for making it clear that the United States, of course, will never become a socialist country, but that we are going to call out and recognize that these governments collude. And they collude because going back to 1917, every communist party in power can trace its roots ideologically and in terms of learning how to take over society and put their spin on it. It's all gone back to Vladimir Lenin and his revolution.
Did any of the participants express to the president concern about him embracing dictatorial, authoritarian leaders? Was there any conversation about that?
I do not think that is an accurate assessment, but I will say there was a very candid assessment of the countries that these individuals are familiar with, and there were a lot of questions. It really was a back and forth learning about the experience reality, not the politics, but the human experimentation that continues to go on in societies controlled by communist parties.
Last question to Grace Cho.
Grace.
Did you talk about this with the president, or what are your feelings about? He seems to have this very friendly relationship with your former president, or your current president, whatever you call him, Kim. He says they're friends. He said there is love. He describes letters as beautiful, and they actually seem to get on. The human rights thing doesn't seem to come up. So, what do you feel about that?
Well, first of all, I did not express the feeling to the president. I think that's more part of a politic, and I think the President Trump is very nice, and he has a very good first impression. So I think when he met the Kim Jong-un, I think that was just for the polite and greatness. So I don't think he spoke that like nice words toward to the Kim Jong-un as a genuine, true feeling. Well, I didn't ask that question to the President Trump, but if he really compliment Kim Jong-un in that words, and that's really true, then I don't really agree on that one, because he doesn't deserve all those compliments.
Did you say you had asked the president if he could bring up human rights issues when he meets with Kim again? I was having trouble hearing. So.
No, I did not ask. But if I would like to ask, then I can ask the same question to him.
2 years ago, in the interview with Fox News, you talked about you're hoping you as an ally will be able to use covert action to overthrow the Cuban regime. Do you still hold the same opinion against the local regime, and hoping that you as an allies can conduct such actions to
Did you understand the question? You don't have to answer if you don't understand.
Would you please repeat?
Huh?
Would you please repeat?
I didn't hear it.
Okay. I think that question is asking me like 2 years ago when I do the interview. The United States and allied countries, they have to keep push the North Korean government. Is that right?
Yes. You say the North Korean country should not exist in this.
Yes, sir. That is my voice, and that never changed, because the North Korean regime, they will not change, even though they say they will change or they will show some changes, but it's not internally or completely changing. They might polishing their policies or their country images and then showing the world that they're improving and they're changing, but their policy is that they have to control and isolate those people from the world, and that's how they can rule the country. So I believe without our force or without United States help, the North Korean people will never find freedom.
I think we're going to have to wrap it up. But
Spanish.
Spanish.
Yeah, sí, sí.
¿Le puedes traducir a ella? O bueno, te la hablo en español. ¿Habló el presidente de algún apoyo, por ejemplo, de España al cambio en Cuba? Usted hablaba del flujo de dinero y recientemente ha habido tensión entre los dos gobiernos. ¿Se ha referido el presidente hacia Europa o hacia el apoyo que pueda tener en sus cambios?
No hablamos de eso porque sinceramente no domino nada de inglés, y entonces lo que yo le expresé, él lo hizo la traducción.
Yo traduje en la reunión, no hablamos de ese tema.
¿Hablasteis de cambio inmediato en Venezuela, de régimen? ¿El presidente te dijo que todavía es algo que esté trabajando él?
Lo que hablamos y lo que yo le expresé al presidente es el agradecimiento que tenemos los venezolanos a su política, y que debe continuar su política para poder derrotar al régimen de Maduro, que es nuestro objetivo.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Hogan, you were going to answer why the event was closed.
I'll answer